Christ said, "Don't stare into the eyes of the mob" when they were, throwing the stones. That's kind of the idea. You can not put your head in the sand. You kind of have a detachment, but don't look into their eyes. You can kind of really get hyped up and brought into the
No,
the,
that's a
the
great
mania.
point. That's a
Yeah.
great point. Well, I'm talking to the elusive James Kourtides today. He's the host of the Rooster's Crow Pod. Where have you been? What have you been doing? I
I've
can't
been
find you
busy.
anywhere. You've been hiding in the shadows. Have you become the Phantom of the Opera of YouTube?
I've been on a hiatus, man. I haven't been on any kind of social media, Twitter. I haven't been making any content, and it's been kind of an organic hiatus. And I feel like I just don't have anything to say right now or participate in
Did you go
kind
to
of the
Mount
social
Athos or
stuff, man.
something? What
I
happened?
did, I did. Maybe that was part of it.
How
I
long after
that
did you go there that you quit your
it
talk?
was probably a couple of months. When I got back. Now that you think of it, I never thought of it
Uh
like
oh.
that. You
You
know.
got a revelation there to maybe
I I
don't say so
did.
much?
I got the download. Silence is the key, which is hard for me, but it's been good, man. I've been spending a lot of time with the family. I've been kind of immersed in work, just getting my kind of health right, eating right, feeling better.
No.
I think I'm on just an organic hiatus, and I'll be back when the time is right.
Yeah, you're going to be coming down from the rafters like the Phantom of the Opera, right?
Right? Yeah, coming back. Hopefully, have something to say.
So,
I just feel like
are you overall pleased with what Trump has been doing politically? Are you kind of neutral, mixed feelings, or disappointed?
I'm pleased. I'm,
Yeah,
I'm pleased. I mean, not I don't like everything that he's done per se,
yeah.
but his general posture, kind of what he's been doing, I'm with it, man. I've
I
cut
don't.
off. Another thing that I've done is I've completely stopped participating in these text threads that I were on with friends and cousins talking
Oh, yeah,
politics. I
yeah.
stopped completely.
You just stopped, and that was probably good for your mental health, wasn't it? Yeah,
Oh, it's been great. And they're
yeah.
texting me like, "Where are you, man?" I'm like, "I'm done with that, man. I
Good,
cannot." It still goes on
good.
50, 60
Yeah,
messages a day. I'm like, I just have no interest
that's how
in
Twitter and all that
participating
stuff
in that.
is. Yeah, yeah.
It's the same stuff like over and over again. Maybe
I
it's
think
like,
that that's. I think people get adrenal fatigue from Twitter, all the noise, constant yelling and screaming. You know what I mean? It's
yeah.
exhausting.
Well, part of it may be like, it's kind of like the dog that caught the car. Stop barking. You caught the car. It's good. Things were kind of precarious for a while, and I feel I had to go through the corpus of Western philosophy and history to share that with people to show that there's something there. And
Mhm.
then, it seems like there's been a turn in the culture, and that voice
But
maybe
we're
isn't
still
as,
on
as
the edge
necessary
of
anymore.
World War III and all this crazy stuff. So even though it
Yeah,
feels different on one level, you never know what things can change on a black swan type event.
no, you're right. You're
But
right.
so that's why we need James back in the game. When the Lord
Yeah,
calls him to.
right.
Um,
Whenever he's ready, I'm here.
and you talked about reading. You were, for those who are not familiar with your YouTube channel. Um, you did a lot of reading of books and stuff. What your favorite book that you read on your channel?
Oh man. I went through a lot of different writers in different kind of domains. But the one that started it all was Seraphim Rose, a book by Father Damascene
Hmm.
called Christ and the Eternal Tao,
Hmm.
which really kind of inaugurated the whole reading on YouTube type thing. And then from there, just the church fathers, a lot of kind of postmodern philosophy, and reading that against the church fathers was really fruitful for me and very interesting. And then I found that some other people have been doing that, and that David Bentley Hart does this in this book that I've recently been going through, The Beauty in the Infinite, which I just
Yeah.
got. So I really think, and he talks about how why would we as theologians, as he is taught, really engage with postmodern thought. And he says that, the West is kind of the fruits of Christianity, right? And postmodernism is the fruits of the West, right? So we got to engage with it and what the message is, what the critique is, and have an answer. Kind of what is the originary Christian authentic response to the postmodern critique, and I find that really compelling to explore.
Yeah. And you talked about Father Seraphim Rose and David Bentley Hart. That's like the full gamut of politics in the Orthodox influencers there, right there. So that's what I appreciate about you, is that you're one of those few open-minded people on the public square that is willing to engage without some kind of tribal,
Mm-hmm.
constipation that makes it difficult for other people to just exist and think and not be afraid or something, or
Yeah, I'm
angry.
allergic to that. For some reason, I think it's maybe some kind of dispositional attitude where I don't have that tribal impulse almost at all. I don't know. It might be not a great thing or a good thing, or it might be a good thing. I don't know, but I don't have that.
Yeah,
I
me
never
neither.
have.
That's why we always got along well on our shows on radio and everything. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's going to be critical for the what emerges in our culture in the future is people who are not, um, you know, it's harder for politics and its evil to work when people become more ungovernable or unmanageable, or in terms of they're just too unique and they're not tribalistic in their sense making. Now everybody thinks they're unique already, so that's kind of the paradox of this. But the more people can truly kind of think for themselves critically and feel for themselves critically, they become more in tune with their humanity and less in
Hmm.
tune with tribal social influence, right? And so I, I am paradoxical about Donald Trump. I like a lot of things that I see him doing. I like his, I like the person I like his personality more than I like his policies.
Hmm.
I like him as a character.
Yeah.
From an entertainment character, I find him a very interesting character to watch. And and I'm pleased with some of the things that he's done. It's certainly better than the nihilistic hellscape that was Biden. My goodness, I mean,
Yeah.
how long they lied his cancer and God knows what other diseases he has, and he's just psychopaths that were running that administration are just absolutely mind blowing. At least in the Trump world, there is some relative daylight between people. Like there's a little bit of like variance of thought, which is like,
Hmm.
it's like a little straw of amount of air, fresh air, when you're buried by, just mind numbing zombie like, politics that we went through for 4 years, But
Yeah.
at the same
Yeah. You see,
time, yeah, go ahead.
You see Tapper's new book that just came out. Jake
I,
Tapper wrote a
I didn't
book.
see it, but yeah, what was your general takeaway from what you heard of it so far?
It's entitled Original Sin, by the way, and he interviewed 200 people close to the president, political act, people close to him. And he said they opened up to him kind of like he was Barbara Walters after the election, where before they were tight lipped, but it's like they couldn't get this stuff off of their chest fast enough, how fast he was. And obviously, he was deteriorating in so many ways. He would forget his closest advisors' names, stumbling around. And, you and I saw it from 2020, 2019. Like this was completely obvious to
Yeah,
anyone that had eyes to see. And this goes to the point of not being tribal. You get into this tribal, kind of echo chamber of way of looking at the world, you actually don't perceive reality. Yeah, and the same thing with COVID. People just would not perceive
yeah,
reality because they were in some kind of mass, psychosis formation. It's like
yeah.
holy cow! But there is a reckoning coming. I see a lot of people are silent now. A lot of people just want to move forward. Hey, let's not talk about the shots. Let's not talk about the COVID insanity. Let's not talk about Biden's deterioration in front of our eyes and how we kind of deny that. Nobody wants to look
Yeah.
back.
And the biggest thing I'm having right now is a stumbling block because I spent a lot of my years in political commentary making foreign policy a focus of my work. And, the things that we're doing in Gaza are just unconscionable and not acceptable. And you just can't, I can't, as someone who understands the Bible, the anthropology that Rene Girard helped us see, I can't go along with this little Whoville act where we just, oh, MAGA's good enough, my taxes are cut or something like that, a little bit less DI, and that's a sufficient price to allow Gazans to be slaughtered. Nah, can't do that. Can't do that.
Yeah.
And that's for any, and I'm really irritated by the lack of sovereignty that it seems that the Trump administration has in terms of its relationship with Israel. I'm hoping that that can be changed. I know that's easier said than done. I'm sure there's a lot of tangled mess in there, but Iran, we can't have any strikes and go into war and carrying their beer for them again as they start wailing at Iran. We're not doing that. I've been battling this
It just,
Iran war
yeah,
propaganda since I was a young guy out of high school when I first started writing for WorldNet Daily, and they were running that Zionist propaganda on there, and I was, that's why I went to write there because I wanted to be contending in the debate, and it's like the same stupid talking points. These guys have been hungry for a war with Iran, and it's so psychopathic. And I'm just, we're all done with it, but we still,
yeah.
DC hasn't got that memo yet. They're still completely owned by the psychopaths.
Yeah, I think you've seen a little bit of a break from Israel from the Trump administration where they're not completely, they're not going to give weapons to Israel if they're going to attack Iran. And, Israel said they're going to go it by themselves. So I think you're seeing some daylight there where you haven't seen that before.
I hope
They
it's got to
actually,
be decisive though, because we could get
yeah,
easily
yeah,
embroiled in there with some kind of attack on our people. Our people are all sitting there like good little sitting ducks there, in terms of our
yeah.
bases and stuff, and that's
Oh,
dangerous.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Put a little false flag there. But I think the people, you've been paying attention to kind of the Dave Smith, Tucker Carlson, discourse that's been going out there versus the Mark Levin. Have you been paying attention to that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
That's
Ben
interesting.
Shapiro, yeah, you can see the changing of the guard is really taking
Yeah,
place rapidly, where Levin just looks like a total dinosaur, like something from another,
100%.
godforsaken era of conservatism, Inc. And so does Ben Shapiro. He just looks like a little kitty, the kids' table, the kids' corner, Mark Levin, And
Yeah,
that's what you had to do to make money if you wanted to be an influencer in the algorithms. You had to kowtow to the war machine and the constant Zionist war machine. That's what it's always been like, And
yeah,
I took the Ron Paul pill when I was right out at the gate in 2007 when I was writing articles and I've had to go the tortoise route, not the hare route, as an influencer because of that. And that's all the more for it because history is vindicating us. Unfortunately, it's hard to wrap your head around the amount of suffering that people have to go through. You know what I mean?
mm,
Like, I
yeah,
mean, if something were to happen in in Florida, where people are being bombed to smithereens and just totally kids are being targeted, we couldn't even fathom the level of pain and suffering. And that just happens over and over again here with Gaza, but for decades with this mismanagement of foreign policy. We have how many wars, all the killing, it's just unconscionable. And you can't even wrap your head around it. How do
yeah.
you process that as a Christian? You're happy that Trump's in there, but he's still hiring and still picking people. And I know everybody says Rubio's changed. He's just dialed his warmongering down a couple ounces. I mean, it's not a total change.
Yeah, I mean, I don't combine my Christianity at all with anything that's happening political. Like the whole Christian nationalism thing as an anathema to me. That's not what it's about at all. I kind of look at juxtaposing, Trump's, even policies versus what was before. It's like, oh man, so and the fact that we're even talking about and we're seeing this daylight between the kind of, implicit support for Israel's policies from a foreign policy perspective. And now you're seeing this daylight and it's being presented and you're seeing it on the right and this divide that I think is good, that there is this actual daylight between them. And I think we're going to continue in this vein, and I think you're even seeing now that, I think Levin talked about how the term neocon is a cloak for anti-Semitism. So he says the term neocon is a cloak for Jew. I'm like,
Oh yeah, I
whoa,
heard him say
that's
that. Yeah.
that's a damn stretch, man. That's so ridiculous. It's just going to disclose more of the absurdity of their position. So, but I see my Christianity kind of in a different light, than applying it in anything politically that's happening.
Interesting. So you've taken kind of a detached approach I mean, maybe I'm misreading, but that there's the domain of politics and the domain of Caesar, and then the domain of the spiritual realm that should be detached or interacting, but just not keeping your expectations low on the political side, or how do you view it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know how Christ said, "Don't stare into the eyes of the mob" when they were, throwing the stones. That's kind of the idea. You know, you can not put your head in the sand. You kind of have a detachment, but don't look into their eyes. You can kind of really get hyped up and brought into
No, it's a
the
great
mania.
point. That's a
Yeah,
great point.
that's kind of the idea that I think
Yeah,
I'm
when you
trying to
look in their
communicate.
eyes, that's what you're doing when you get on the social media where they're all hyping up one way or the other, aren't you? You're
Yep.
it's a digital version of it, but it's still the kind of you catch the contagion of emotional aggression. That's a great point. Yeah.
Even if you're on the right side of it, you're still participating in the mania. You
Yeah,
know.
because you're trying to
So
stay level-headed about it, and then you can get swept up right up in the emotional rhetoric. Oh, you got them there. That's true. Oh, you know what I mean?
yep.
You see something rude or insulting against someone that is in agreement with you, and then you see them go back rude, and you enjoy it, and then you're just swept right up in the mimetic contagion, and it's got you revved up for no reason, and you're kind of hallucinating in this kind of aggressive schoolyard fight posture all the time, right? That's what
Yeah.
social media functions as, and it's interesting. As someone that you've done a podcast, you didn't do it to a full time degree like I've been doing for years, but um, you certainly put in a lot of time into it. What do you think is how do you, this is like a perennial question I always ask people that, like, how do you do media, in that environment? Because it's true, the algorithm is so game for, if you have to say like, top 5 reasons why James Kourtides left podcasting. That's what I have to title this to make this, but I don't do that because it's lowbrow to me. It's stupid. You do it a little bit, it's okay to be catchy or whatever. That's fine. But, like to just dwell in that kind of mind space is just a waste of life to just try to catch the crowd, right? But yet at the same time, media is such an important calling for the Christian, right? And I always tell people, don't wait for some podcast or influencer to like be your guru, to live vicariously through you. Be a media every day. You use your voice to call attention to those who are the vulnerable, the scapegoats, whatever, the misfits. So how do you do media without seeing the eyes of the crowd? Because it's
I,
become so crowd like now.
I think you the eyes are the likes, so you can't do it for the likes. And I show my son, like, I'm not doing it for the likes, and I'm not doing it to grow the channel. And this is why, I've kind of had a parallel vocation that I'm involved in, that I'm blessed to have, that it's very
Yeah.
nurturing and whatnot. So I have that. So I don't need to grow the channel. I'm not looking to make money off of it. I don't care about I mean, you do a little bit, right? But I'm not doing it for the likes and for the engagement and whatnot. So I'm not doing it for the eyes. As evidenced by it just stopped for months now. Not worried that the channel is going to die, the algorithm is going to forget about me. That doesn't matter to me. I think it's just a blessing disposition that I have. I don't know why I have that, but I think that's the key, right? People that will find it, that need to find it, will find it. And I've had a lot, even like with not posting and publishing videos. I still get messages of people finding old videos like, "Oh man, thanks for this. This is great," and "Oh, well, I needed this at this time." That's what it's about, touching those people that are ready to hear that information, whether it's Sarah from Rose or the church fathers. That's what it's about, man. Lightning, a little lightning bolts or flashes here and there, rather than trying to do it for a mass audience.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said, and it's the trick is, I think that's the future of media, that that a lot of it will become a tent making enterprise. Like you have to have your full time job or whatever, and then you do that on the side
Mm-hmm.
as a vocation. Kind of like how a lot of evangelical Christianity in the last century felt that it was for a time their vocation to like knock on doors and pass out pamphlets, right, to evangelize. I think that
Mm-hmm.
people the future of Christianity in America could look like millions of people, and they're already doing it, but I mean in a more conscientious way, where you're not just trying to spout off, but you're trying to like intentionally do like what you did, which like, I want to spread knowledge and I want to explore ideas and be, meet, role models online and interact with them and spur inspiration for people through something they hear that I've explored. Uh, and being more aware of your mimetic role model and then using
Yeah.
it intentionally, but not necessarily in a way that leverages you that you have to do that to pay the bills. Because once you do that, it's very challenging.
Hmm.
That's a very challenging thing because the meter between telling the truth about, like, the more you tell the truth about the more topics, the more you get
Hmm.
buried in the algorithm, and
Yeah.
the more you compromise or sensationalize or both, the more
Hmm.
you become swept up in the machine, and that's how you start to get sponsors or whatever.
Yeah. Comes a feedback loop to, the algorithm is moving you to feed it rather than the other way around.
Right.
Another thing that just came up to me, this stuff is permanent or semi-permanent. So watch the content that you make through the eyes of your grandkids when they're adults. They're going to go
Right. Yeah.
back and see grandpa, what was grandpa doing? Look at these videos he made, man. You find an old picture of your grandpa or your great grandpa when they were younger. You're like, it's just such a precious thing. You're like, oh, look at this, man.
Yeah.
Now we have hours and hours of content for our future
Yeah.
generations to look back on. That's wild, man. I don't even
Yeah.
know what to make of that.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool though.
Yeah, just seeing, wow, you dealt with that issue back then. I can't believe they were doing that. They were
Yeah,
eating that kind of trash, seed oils, and you had to fight about that every day on radio, or they were literally thinking about that it was okay to, like, just kill kids in Gaza every day and just, like, play victimism to make us, like, shut up. Like, you really had to go
yeah,
through that. I mean, hopefully it'll be a better place that they will have the moral perspective, and I think it will be because
I
you
do
know
too.
I think things are trending. It's funny how things are like simultaneously more nihilistic but more morally awakened at the same time. With the younger
Yeah.
generation, more checked out. I saw somebody was showing a video of some Gen Z guys watching that Mexican boat crash some of its mass into the Brooklyn Bridge the other day, and there was, like, bodies flying off and stuff, and the guy was just going, "Whoa, whoa, those are people up there," and they were like, "Dude,
Hmm.
this guy's." Neurons are, like, fried, and they were mocking, like, Gen Z people are like that, and
Yeah.
I was like, man, that's so despairing to think about that on one level, but yet Gen Z's got high rates of returning to Christianity and being against the war machine and the neocon nastiness. So it's weird how that's happening at the same time.
Well, watch out for Gen Alpha, right? Gen Alpha, the young kids are way farther along in returning to the truth than Gen Z. So Gen Z is the end of something. So you're looking at, it's on
Yeah.
the end of the alphabet, right? And you actually you see the latter half of Gen Z is moving towards what Gen Alpha is picking up. And I see it in my own children and their friends, and they're interested in Christianity, and they're interested in wholesome things. It's very
Wow.
cool. They're interested in wholesome things, and I love to see it. So I think it's very encouraging to see that, and it's very poetic and symbolic that we're starting back over at Gen Alpha, and we're seeing that kind of turn happen as we turn to this new generation that's kind of starting at the top again. It's kind of fascinating.
What is that? What do you think? What are the vibes of the Generation Alpha scene that you think is that you're picking up? I mean, from what you can.
Yeah, I think they're interested in theological, thinking theologically, as much as they can. I think they're seeing the fruitlessness of drinking and alcohol and drugs and sex and pornography and all that. They're just not interested in that. It doesn't have that pull and that kind of that drive anymore. I think part of that is we've seen the outcome of that. We've seen the despair that it's led to in some of these latter generations. I think they organically are turning away from that, which is it's a wonderful, beautiful thing. You're also seeing them kind of more interested in actually participating in going to church. I was watching a video today of Alex O'Connor, and I think his name is Lennox, the theologian guy Lennox, and they were talking about this
John
turn,
Lennox, the
especially
guy.
with, yeah,
Yeah.
John Lennox, yeah, talking about this turn of not people just believing in God again, but actually going to church again. And you're just seeing the fruits of nihilism ultimately are nothing, right? And we've pushed that to its end, and that's going to leading to kind of a return to a more original understanding of not going back to like this false Christianity or this superficial Christianity. People are looking for the truth deeply, And I think they're finding it because it's there and it's at hand. And I was reading in this Hart book. I don't know if I can find the quote, but he says something. The kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of man, or the city of heaven, and the city of man. He's quoting Augustine, are at hand. What does that mean? And how do you know what city you're living in? And that's what you love and what you desire is going to determine what kingdom you're in. I'm like, oh, that's perfect. What you love, what you desire, what you focus on is going to disclose the kingdom. Both kingdoms are here at hand and present. How do you determine which one that you're in? Is by what you're focusing on, what you're desiring, what your love is. Show me where your heart is. That's where your treasure is, in a sense, right? So if you're focusing on trying to find the originary, Christian impulse, trying to follow Christ's commandments, that is going to disclose the kingdom of heaven here, right now on earth. And it's such a beautiful, encouraging, hopeful message. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I've always seen it too. Like, well, not always, but recently, like that it's kind of like being an ambassador of the future. What the future of earth will look like, you can tap into now through the mind of Christ, right? As Christ, we are the body of Christ. We're in the mind of Christ. We have this relationship between God and the link between man and God, Jesus. And through that, we're able to like tap into the future of where all humanity will be when the earth is full and complete, and all things are in, like God is in all, as the text says. And so when
Yeah.
that happens, like we don't have to wait and just slog it out now. We can live it out now. And that's some of the things that I've tried to introduce in the discourse through the years, is that a lot of the folks who have become interested in Christianity again, the millennials and Gen Z who are converting to traditional, they call it trad, or the word for that, for older forms of Christianity, that it's important to not get in a reactive, backwards looking view while you convert to those traditions, but to keep the progressive, uh, future looking view that Christianity actually has in its organic form, right? And so because we were sold so much fake uh versions of Christianity, because that's what a lot of modernism is, and all this kind of like, like a perversion of the universality of Christianity, the idea of we can cure all the diseases and everything. All of that's Christian, and you should do that. But there's a way in which it's done in modernism, which is a kind of a fool's errand that uses violence to do it. And so trying to recover, and I said that on, the social media the other day, that, that the only Christianity is the only answer to resolve conserving traditions while having a progressive view of the future. Like together,
Yeah.
you can't reconcile that without Christianity.
Yeah, that makes sense. Christianity endures. Christ is here yesterday, today, and tomorrow. If you take that seriously, that means he's always ever present and available to you if you turn towards him, which is a wonderful thing, man.
Yeah.
I think that's what's happening, and it's encouraging to see that. I think Hart in this book at the end of it talks about the market, and how the market is actually kind of the final resting place of the Nietzschean impulse of the will to power, and how the market is this revaluation of values. We create our own values. We do that. And at the heart of nihilism is the market, right? The market doesn't value beauty. It doesn't value truth. It values commodity, right? And this commodity exchange. And that's kind of so the market is kind of the final, resting place of the Nietzschean impulse of will to power. And he writes beautifully about that. I've never thought of it like that. I'm like, man, this is cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Him and I did a couple shows together years ago. I don't know if you ever saw those, but that was probably one of the things that he was most irritated by me, is because I have a general, disposition, because of my upbringing in the Ron Paul tradition, to be pro free market. And yet he's more what he would call like an anarcho-communist, and there was a little bit of oil and vinegar attitude he had towards, because I was trying to make common cause with him, and he's like, no, I can't have private property and all this stuff. But that just goes to show that there needs to be that kind of dialogue that continues on.
Let me read a little bit from it, where he talks about this Nietzschean. He says, for all his solicitude for noble values, Nietzsche may prove in retrospect to have been the greatest of bourgeois philosophers. The active and creative force of will he praised may be really a mythic aggrandizement of entrepreneurial ingenuity and initiative. Talk of the will to power, however abstracted and universalized, may reflect only metaphysical inflation of that concept of voluntaristic punctiliarity that defines the quote unquote subject to which the market is hospitable. The notion of a contentless and spontaneous activity that must create values describes in somewhat impressionistic vein the monadic consumer of the free market and the venture capitalist. To speak of the innocence of the all becoming, the absence of good and evil from being, and a general preference for the distinction between good and bad as a purely evaluative judgment is perhaps to speak of the guiltless desire of the consumer, the relativity of want, and the perpetual transvaluation that is so elegantly and poignantly expressed on every price tag, every declaration of a commodity's abstract value. A force that goes always to the limit of what it can do is perhaps at one with modern capitalism's myth of limitless growth and unbounded trade. And he goes on. And he critiques Marx in this vein as well. It's kind of interesting. I just came across that, so I don't know what to really think of it, but it's interesting. Like, what is the free market? And is it what it was before? What has it turned into? Like, I don't think the free market is the same thing it was been, and Adam Smith kind of named it, and that what it was in the industrial age, and now we're in the post-industrial age. What is it now with these commodities that flash on our screens and are even more superficial than they were before? It seems like the free market commodifies. It takes the value, the beauty, the substance out of things and makes them superficial and transactional.
Well, it's like there's a couple of things there. That's like, there's the word free market, which is a symbol for this cultural edifice that we have. And then we have the abstract notion that Austrian economics teaches about, like, markets and how they work. And that might be mixed up into some of the error that there's been a critique for, but there are different things, right? And so it's like the word free market is invoked, like Thor, to mean the system we have and all of its abuses, which is ultimately a fusion between central banking, the state, and these corporate oligarchic controls of the market. But it's like, but you're right that there, and he's right in the sense that there is a cultural critique that needs to be really leveled, that conservatives have to kind of process, which is like, you invoke this word, the market, as a kind of chant to, like, wave the hand about ugly, disgusting ways in which people treat each other in everyday private business scenarios, right? Just because you have a right theoretically, maybe, like in terms of to do something, doesn't mean in a Christian heart you should do it, right? And that's the kind of like, there's this attitude of kind of, well, and I see it, and I've talked about it a lot. It's like, people, even when you go to church, right, there's this kind of notion that, like, as long as you're not doing like something egregious, like running a gambling casino or a prostitution ring, whatever you do in your business is just you, right? You know what I'm saying? And it's like, don't ask, don't tell kind of policy about, like, whatever you do in your business. It's kind of like that separate domain where you could be a money hungry person or a mimetic person or, exploitative consumer capitalist or whatever, and not think more conscientiously about what you're doing with your power or your position in society. That we should be able to redeem all of that. All of that should be redeemed and not just left at, like, I'll tell you, for example, and I mean, it might irritate people, but I don't like real estate. I think people that sell people, and I know that irritates people because it steps on everybody's toes, but, like, selling people on mortgages that they can't afford and getting them into bondage of usury, and your job is to, like, entice them to keep up with the Joneses and then stick their little kids with this disgusting usury. I just find that so disgusting. And yet it's such a banal job that everybody knows someone that does it, that they really care for dearly. And I find it absolutely disgusting. And I think that there is a place for the market critique to come into that, and be like, what are we doing here on an individual level and then a collective level, right? Loading people up with debt. Well, I'm just doing my job. They wanted that house. Well, you could have been a Christian there,
Yeah.
Jesus does condemn usury like a million times. You could have told them, man, but then you wouldn't be a good realtor, would you? Because everybody's just kind of pushing them on their desires, right? So James, what you've raised and what I think what the core, I think, about the best of what David's saying there, and if you have anything else that's in that text, that's great to add to, but it's like it's really a critique on on the the idolatrous notion of the individual and his desires, right? Like we have to get past this notion that, my subjective desires are untouchable, and realize how much of it is just meaningless imitation of other people's desires.
Yeah, because ultimately what we desire is determined by the metaphysics that we're embedded in, right? And at the heart of our postmodern, late market capitalist metaphysics is nothing, right? So we desire things for because of their fashion, because they're in fashion, and they exchange. We get them, and when they're out of fashion, we buy the new thing, and there's nothing there. There's no there. There's no substance in it. He talks about how Christ is once you invest your desire and love in Christ, Christ is uncommodifiable, he says in that, right? He's not a commodity. He resists that. That's why the market doesn't, really, function, in a real Christian sense like that. So at the heart of free market capitalism, at least this late postmodern version, is the desire for nothing, and that's, and I think we've run up against, that's why we're seeing the end of nihilism. The bubble is bursting, and we're seeing that because you see like the traditional midlife crisis. You get the sports car, you get the wife, you get the house, and then you get into your 40s or 50s, and you realize that it was all for naught. And you have a crisis of conscience, right? I think the new generations are going to avoid that because they've seen that we don't need the newest thing, we don't need the newest toy, we need the newest this, that, and the other. I think once you plug in your desire appropriately, through prayer and through, authentic thirst for the Christian heart, then you can participate in the free market without being captured by it. I
Yeah.
think that's what's important.
Yeah. Yeah. That's well said. I like that. And it's something that, I do feel like we're entering into this Wild West territory where everything that was considered untouchable is now touchable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fun, I mean, we recently had the pleasure of seeing my co-host for the show, who Dr. Yu, Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Wei Ping Yu, went on the Patrick Bet David show with Terrence Howard, and he had an
Mm-hmm.
apocalyptic, a neighbor's choice type moment there, because they brought him on with the thought that he might provide the standard conventional establishment view of physics in contrast to Terrence Howard's heretical, deviations. And
Yeah.
instead, Dr. Yu affirmed many things in which Terrence was very right about. And then he gently
Mm-hmm.
critiqued him in a very humble way about things that he thought he wasn't right about. And it was a
Oh
very
wow.
Christian kind of moment. It got like, I think altogether, the clips and things were like past 47 million views. And Dr. Yu
Wow.
became I was so proud moment for me because I'd been pushing, Dr. Yu's ideas and his theory of everything, the Yuan theory, on our show for years and waiting for it to catch on. And it's all this mimetic little, it's a mimetic game, right? And you're like, man, and I've always said, man, I wish people were not so mimetic that they have to wait for the crowd to validate somebody before they'll give it a shot, because that's just
Mm-hmm.
the whole point of being Christian, is being able to look past the eyes of the crowd, like you said, and look for the truth. And you'd
Mm-hmm.
think with a nation of 360 million people, that we would be able to, at least a million of us, or half a million of us could maybe really think like that and use our Christianity that way. We could change the world with just 10,000 people like that.
Absolutely. And I think that's happening. I
Yeah,
think that's what's happening,
yeah,
but you're not going to see it in mass. You're going to see it take hold in little pockets, digitally and in real life, and kind of see this kind of feedback loop that's going on.
yeah,
It kind of, as an aside, I have this at my job. We work with different clients, with medically fragile children, and there was this family where this parents, some parents are very difficult because they got very difficult situations, and they're kind of, counting on caregivers to show up, and sometimes they don't show up. And I had this one of the most kind of challenging clients, and he actually tried to get me fired at a time, and it was a very difficult situation, right? Cut to long story short, he just sent me an email. He joined the Orthodox Church recently because of the conversations that we've had in these difficulties, and just the most mind blowing thing. like I'm seeing this information. He said, James, you played a huge role in this, in me actually being able to find my way here. And he went from this guy that was trying to get me fired, and all of a sudden we're having these theological discussions out of nowhere with someone like a normie at work, and he ended up founding his way into the Orthodox Church. I'm like, wow. So it's and this came from my participation in conversations like this and engaging with people and ideas on the internet. By the way, I wouldn't have found my way back where I'm at now without those things. So the technology is something that, if used appropriately, put in its right place, can actually proliferate the authentic Christian vision of the world, I think.
Yeah.
On that note, have you been following Jordan Hall and his thought on Bitcoin monasteries, and
I haven't. No,
the site?
I haven't talked to him since the around the time that we last had him on the show. But no, what is he up to?
Man, I got to share this conversation that he had. And part of I haven't been able to, like, nothing compelling has seemed to be on the podcast sphere anywhere, like nothing new and compelling. It's just been the reappropriation of the same material. And I caught this conversation he had. I forgot who he had it with exactly. And it was a rather long conversation. At the end of the conversation, they talked about how Bitcoin is really akin to the Christian Holy Spirit and very analogous to it, and talking about how Bitcoin is the future of transaction, and the way that this kind of fabric of transacting that is Bitcoin, that is blockchain, so to speak, inaugurates a new way of being in the world that is very close and akin to the Christian ethic. At the heart of it is integrity, the integrity of trust and transaction. That is at the heart of Bitcoin, right? You don't need a third party. It can be done between two parties, and they talk about how, like, money and law, the function and the effectuation of money and law eventually, seeps itself out into the way people treat each other. And we are kind of an expression of the code that is language, money, and law, right? So we are kind of expressions of that. Over time, the way that we transact, it gets into our way of being with each other. And Bitcoin, or the blockchain, inaugurates a new way of being with each other. And it kind of inaugurates the divine economy of the logos, of transacting each other in complete good faith with integrity. And I'm not able to metabolize it and communicate it, but I found it extremely interesting and compelling to think about how, at the very bottom, the way that we transact with each other, right, actually affects the way that we engage with each other as human beings. Like, there's something at the fundamental code level of language and the law and of money, that these three kind of elements interact within us to engage how we interact with corporations in the world, with each other as neighbors and everything. So it's like this new fundamental code that is emerged, that is this blockchain, is eventually going to inaugurate the kingdom, in a sense, because it verifies a way of transacting and engaging with each other rooted in trust, in faith, actually. I was like, whoa, it was compelling. I'm not doing it any kind of service by trying to summarize it. I'll send it to you. Yeah. But I found it very interesting. I've heard him talk about the Bitcoin monastery before, and I've heard kind of thoughts about Bitcoin in this regard. This was the first time that I'm like, oh, I get what you're talking about. And it kind of lit me up a little bit.
I have to check that out. That reminds me of, like, this prediction I've kind of tried to share with people, which is that, wealth is very scarce, so to speak, in the earthly sense, in this rigged economy. But at the same time, money is not scarce. It's printed out of thin air on computers. Elon was watching trillions go this way and that way. They didn't do anything to codify it in any cuts, with Trump's administration or the Capitol or the House or Senate so far, and they probably won't. But the trillions just disappear out of the Pentagon and go this way and that way and all this stuff. So money is very, like, post scarce, whereas real wealth is very kind of scarce right now for folks in the rigged world economy. And I think that what's going to happen if Christians get their act together with the way Bitcoin and, look how Bitcoin is very scarce. It costs, like, what is it, going closer to $100,000 a coin? So it's, like, very scarce. And I think that money, in my opinion, represents the kind of, and Bitcoin too, is kind of like putting it back in its proper place. It will be extremely scarce in the future, and wealth will be very post scarce. So we're going to switch. Right now, we're living in a country that's flooded with dollar bills on computer paper all the day, all day. And yet
Yeah,
we have no
rooted
money.
into
We have no
nothing
wealth.
though.
We have no
Yeah,
wealth. We
because
got the
that money is referred to nothing. It's
right,
fiat currency. It's and that's actually speaks to the point of since money was currency was taken away from the gold standard. It was fiat and it was based in nothing. Again, the
yeah,
whole metaphysical presence of nothing, right? So the stuff you buy with nothing is invaluable because there's no value that's actually being exchanged at a metaphysical level. And it actually made
right,
our relationships more superficial because the
right.
money isn't rooted on anything. So the
Yeah.
way that we transact isn't rooted on anything,
Yeah. And
So
it's
this
like you're
this
living a lie every day that you give
yeah,
nothing for something, right? Yeah. I like
yeah,
that.
and the
So good,
something
man.
that you get is
Yeah.
rooted in nothing. So there's
Yeah.
no value to it. So this new idea with the Bitcoin and what that is and what it can do,
Yeah.
and kind of grounding, which sounds crazy, right? Grounding value back into something real when Bitcoin seems,
Right.
computers, it's hard to understand. But the whole proof of work concept is what is at the heart of it, and how it actually re kind of roots us back into kind of a reality of transacting with each other. So I think there's a lot more to think about
Yeah.
there, and to think through it.
I think if
And I
we,
don't, yeah,
yeah, I
I've
think,
always had this
yeah.
intuition, even when Bitcoin like came out in recent, that I would tell people about Bitcoin, and they would invest in it and they would trade it just like they do in any other stock, and I would tell them this is different. You can get trade stocks and trade into maybe other cryptos, and all the little ones that popped up. You're
Casino
just
stuff.
participating in the same thing.
Yeah. It's
But
the same
I've
casino.
always
Yeah.
had this intuition that Bitcoin, this blockchain, is different. So when I bought Bitcoin, I never touched it again, and I probably never will, because I have this intuition that whatever this is different. It's different, and so we're trying to apply old concepts of transaction to this new thing, right? And you can do that because you can transact it, just like you do a stock or penny stocks or whatever it is, invest in it, and it goes up, number goes up, and I take some money out, and you can actually do that with it. But I think there's something else there that it hasn't really come to our consciousness what it is and what it may be. So it's
It's
just
probably
interesting.
waiting for, again, that harmony between money, which is in this Bitcoin, which is a concept of the mind. In order for it to progress, it has to be incarnated. It has to be embodied. And I think
Yeah,
the embodiment will be the energy revolution that I keep talking about, whether it's
yeah, it's well said.
cold fusion, or endless energy, some other way, whatever horse gets us to that promised land, when we get to a level where energy is super abundant and we don't give a darn about the Suez Canal or whatever, and so therefore we don't
Hmm.
care about the wars and we don't care about these ridiculous nihilistic, uh, rules based orders that, like you said, mean nothing because they're completely violated for every personal, murderous desire that these people in power have. We would just be able to move away from that as a species when the cat's out of the bag, that energy is, you know, too cheap to meter. And when it gets too cheap to meter, that I think will give the body for Bitcoin or something like it to incarnate. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think
Like
that's a good point.
the
Yeah,
brain
it
the
needs to be
brain
incarnated.
races
Yeah.
at our mind has raced it because we're Gnostic culture. Our mind has raced
Hmm.
ahead of our body. And so our body has to
Yeah.
catch up because our body's still living in gas powered cars. And, that's incarnational physical stuff from 100 years ago. Once we
Yeah.
calibrate back up to where we should be, it'll situate the money in its proper place, and the banks will go bye bye, and the cartels that have spent, like, and the thing that I'm most excited about is what Ray Peat taught me, when I got to know him, and just meeting so many delightful followers of his that I've got to know through the show and on offline. I mean, it's been remarkable because it it really does ground a lot of the spiritual principles that Jesus teaches and Paul teaches in a way that's very concrete. Like, okay, this isn't just some kind of, like, when you hear about the spirit man and all this stuff, it's very esoteric and woo woo for people. It's like some kind of spiritual, just another religion. What is, I got to get to my spirit
Hmm.
man? What is Paul talking about? But then when you realize that, like, I thought about it, that the thyroid is the mediator between the mind and the body. The
Hmm.
thyroid, because people talk about having a high thyroid or low thyroid, and they typically associate that with, like, weight, but no, people can have a high or low thyroid on any kind of body type because it's what you're
Hmm.
doing to your environment, it's the stress, it's the food and everything else, it's the mindset you have that impacts your metabolic rate. And I thought about it and I said, so much of what spiritual disciplines we've been bought into, the spirit of religion in a sacrificial sense, has been that, the things of religion, the things of God are like an attack on the things of the body. That's a disorientation of your metabolic system that produces that
100%.
kind of theology. Because think about your thyroid is positioned in your neck, and you've got your head, which has got your mind, and then you got the rest of your body. It's the mediator between heaven and earth. And so why would you practice a lifestyle if you do intermittent fasting, 1 meal a day, if you're doing low calorie restrictions, if you're doing low carb or ketogenic diet? And look, I advocated for those things, so I have to repent publicly for it. And I have been over the years of talking about this the other way. But when you do all those things, what you're doing is you're downregulating your metabolism, which means, in other words, you're dysregulating the mediator between your body and your spirit. I started thinking about it.
Right,
and when you think about what Jesus said, he says, if you want to know what the kingdom of heaven is like what I want you to be like together, go look at the kids. Well, kids have a high thyroid unless they're poisoned, So kids have a high functioning thyroid that keeps their body and spirit resonating really nice harmoniously, which is the picture of the Christian view of the human. The dualists that we lived in. See, we live in this dualistic mindset. In the dualistic mindset of Descartes, that here's your body, here's your mind, and never the two shall meet. They're just like little different domains of the world. That's bullcrap. That's why we're in the problem we're in today. Because we don't want to integrate the incarnational view of the body and soul together. And so we don't want to take Christianity down to the roots and say, no, it has things to do like thyroid and function. It has things to do like carbon dioxide and how that plays a role in your mitochondria. And if you think about it, the picture of the body working in resonance together is the picture of the human collective species body working in resonance together. Right? Because when you look at your mitochondria, when it's in good health, flowing with your heart, flowing with the orchestrator of it all, the thyroid, and then flowing with your brain, guess what? Your whole cellular community in your body is like in a perfect unity of mind, which is what Jesus says we have to do as a species. He says, I wish above that they were one. I wish above all else that they were one, as you and I are one, talking to his Father. And that when the world sees the church be one, they will know that you sent me. And I think there's a mystery there that we've got to press into. But let's leave it there, James, because I know you got to go. But you finish your thought there, and I know I got to get you out of here.
I think the hormones in general are the bridge between the spirit and the material world and the physical body. And I think once you have you're regulated appropriately, you can see reality as it is. You can perceive reality as it is a lot better. It's actually it's a immune function against ideology. If you can think clearly, if your metabolism is correctly, you're not going to get caught up into COVID and all this other stuff, so it's very fascinating. But thank you, David. I appreciate you, man. Good to connect with you. Thanks for getting me out of my hole. And until next time.
All right. We'll do it again.
Thanks, my friend.